Hello everyone, I hope you are doing well. In the previous video, we learned about error handling in Python. We learned how some keywords like try, except, finally and else works. We also learned about how we can raise our own error. I hope you understood all the concept clearly. If you are facing any difficulties, please put in the comment section and I'll try to solve all of them. In today's class, we'll be learning our class. But before learning class, there is one very important topic that you should be comfortable with, that is functions in Python. We have gone through functions in Python in the episode 10 of this series. If you haven't watched, please watch it, because if you don't know how function works in Python, there is no way to get how classes works. Okay, functions are the backbone of how classes work. So if you wanted to get an understanding of how class work in Python, then you should know how function works completely, how we can pass attributes, what variables are, and how function actually performs, what are return keyword and all of them. So before going to this today's lecture, please look over the functions lectures and see if you understand everything. And if you are comfortable with Python, then come back to this class. So the first question may be coming like, what is class? So if you define in a simple word, like class is like a blueprint. It's like a plan or recipe how you define an object in the real world. Okay, it's a reference from the real world itself. So in a real world, if you want to create something, there is a procedure how you create it, right? And if there is anything to change, there is a procedure for that also, like how you change it. So that is where the class take reference from. It's just like a blueprint or a plan or recipe from where you can create the real object. So if you go by definition in simple words, right, then it will be like a class is like a blueprint, a plan or recipe that defines how to create object. So class itself is not object. Okay, class itself is not real object. Okay, it's not real object. It's just a blueprint. It's just a blueprint to create one. So if you want to define in small words or small like understandable words, like what class is, right? You can say class is like a blueprint, a plan or recipe that defines how to create object. Class itself is not the real object. It's just a blueprint to create one. And what objects are? Objects are the real world things. Like, so if you take in a pottery, right? Suppose there's an example of pottery. Pottery, the recipe of pottery is not the pot or the vase itself, right? So it's a recipe how to create one. The real world, the real object, like real objects like what you say, you can say pot, vase, plate. These are the real object, right? But there is a recipe for creating one, right? Blueprint. So blueprint for pottery, that is the real class. That is the class. So that is the class means this blueprint of pottery, right? That is the class from where we can make an object, that the real object like pot, vase or plate. So that is how a class can be defined in simple words for understanding. If you are a beginner, you can just say class is a blueprint, or it's like a lines where saying like how to create real object from it. It's not the real object, but it gives an idea like how to create the real object and what are the measures to be taken, what are the characteristics that objects may have, what are the functionality that objects can behave like. So that is what a class is. So we'll be taking the example of pottery here, okay? And we'll explain one by one how classes are defined in Python, how you can use it, how you can create your own, and how objects are created using this blueprint. So to define classes in Python, what you can use a keyword called class, class. Okay, it's a small c and class. This is a keyword. Okay, you can't change any letter of it and ask it to behave like class. And then you need to write the name of the class. So in function we said we use smaller case underscore smaller case, right? But here we'll be using capital case. The first letter of the word should be in capital. Okay, and if you are wanted to add anything, don't use underscore here, just make it one more. It's all title case with no space. Like if you say pottery blueprint, right, then you'll be writing something like this. So you won't use an underscore when writing the name of the class. Okay, so this is how a class name of a class should be defined. So this is a recommended way. Use it this way so that your code become readable by others also. And you know, Python focuses more on readability also. So use how it's recommended. Okay. Then use the colon symbol. Then you put an indentation. Then you can define your function inside. As I said, learning function is very important. Okay. If you want to get started with class, first you should know how function works, how it performs. If you don't know how function works, then learning class is very difficult, and it's not recommended also to learn about class if you don't know how function works. Okay, yeah, if you go to some object oriented language like Java, you'll directly be introduced to classes without knowing how function work. But if you go step by step, right, so in Python, since Python works in functional also and in the object oriented also, So first knowing function, then going to classes is very useful and very helpful also, because you know some of the steps already involved, so it becomes easier to understand. So I'll recommend you go to a 10th lecture. I'll be putting in the card to learn more about function, then come back to this class. Okay, so now this is how a class is defined. Then you can write here all the functionality or anything, right? So suppose we want to define, so we want to make a function called def, and we want to make color, or we want to say that how to change a color. Okay, change color to, or you can say set color to. Okay, suppose we have a pottery, we made a pot, now we want to change the color of pot. In the real world you'll paint something, right? But to paint that you rate it somewhere, right? So you make a pot, then you use this brush and paint it, right? So here also we'll say set color to, set color, and suppose we did not define like what to do here. Okay, so this is how you can define a class, and this class will have some functionality. Okay, so okay, let's write here. Then the objects will have its characteristics and actions. Okay, here characteristics means the attributes, and the action will be the methods or the functions, what we'll see. So in Python, right, when you define a class, the functions inside classes are called methods. Okay, so the object will have its characteristic. When you, from a blueprint, when you create a pot, you create a vase, that will have its own characteristic, right? A vase and a pot is two different things. Vase, you use vase for storing flowers, raw flowers, put water on it, and for pot mostly we use for traditional work, like we use in festivals and all of that in India. So they have their own characteristic, like, and they'll have their own functions also, like the way you set color. See, this the set color is a functionality of this object, right? It will help you set the color of it. So a vase can have different type of color. It is based upon user, right? Who the end user that will say this, I want a vase of this color. So it's a work of a pottery to change the color based on the what a user demand. So this will be the some of the function that will be specific to objects. But when you define a function inside class, right, there is one argument that is passed by default to every function. In Python we call it self. You can name it anything, the argument. When we learn about functions in Python, we said the arguments can be named anything, but it's usually named so that it serves its purpose and the user who is looking at it understand why this argument was used. So the self argument says whenever we create an object from this blueprint or this pottery blueprint, right? So this set color will be based for that particular pot or vase that is created using this blueprint. Everything will not be the same. Every pot will not have the same color. We won't change color of all the pots or vase in the same time. Whenever I call this set color, it should only change color for that pot that I made using this blueprint. Okay, the specific one. So this self says that this is for specific object created using this blueprint. Okay, let's put a comment here. Self says the function or method that this is specific to that particular object this is called for. So this is not a perfect how you say, but for English word, for general knowledge of what self is, right, you can say this self, right? This self will say this function that this is not for all the pots or vase created using the blueprint, but this is for only the specific pot or vase that is saying I want to change my color. So this is for specific one or specific multiple that are saying that I want to change color for my vase, for my pot, but not all the objects or all the pots and vases that was created using this blueprint. Okay, so this is how a class looks in Python. Then you can put here, then comes the attributes, right? We said that attributes. So there is one special function in Python. Okay, when you use classes, there is one special function that is called init, INIT, and here also we can use this self. Okay, this function you don't need to call this. So whenever you create an object, right, this function is created by itself. So what do I mean by this? So whenever you create, okay, first let's go to creation of object. Okay, let's keep this aside. So we'll write pass, that means this won't do anything. We'll come back to this init. Okay, first we'll learn how to create an object so that you know when this is being called. Okay, So suppose this is a pottery, this is a pottery blueprint. Okay, so let's put a comment here, blueprint. Okay. Now you wanted to create an object of it. This itself is not an object, right? This is just a blueprint, like what can be created using this blueprint. Now suppose you want to create a real world object. Suppose you want to create a pot. So how you define it? The name you give to an object, right, or the variable that you're putting here, should at least resemble like what it is supposed to do. Okay, like we said, when we are writing variables and all that, right, put the variable in such a way that the user know what this variable value can be and what it is supposed to mean. And to create an object of this blueprint, what you can write name of the class and put the parenthesis like this. When you do this, right, this will create an object of it, this pot. Now if you take the real world example, this is the blueprint, but this is the real object. So you can put a comment here pot is the real object. So using this blueprint, how a sculpture or the pottery man, how he creates a pot, right? So here you are the pottery man and you are creating this pot using this blueprint called pottery. Okay, so here this pot is the specific or the real object that is created using this blueprint. Now this pot can have its own thing. It can have its own material, it can have its own color, it can have its own shape. So that is how you create an object using this blueprint. Now you can print this pot. Okay, you can say print this pot. Now if you run this, okay, Python 16 and run this, see, you will see pottery object. Why? Because in Python we say this is an object. So this is a class, and the children of it that you create using this assignment, right, these are the objects instantiated from this class. Okay, that's why it's a pottery object. So here pot is the pottery object of this blueprint called pottery. Now when you create this object, right, there is one function that is called by default. So let's see, call print here something. Okay, right here print called init. Suppose this is just a print word. Okay, now if you run this once again, okay, see, you see called init. So whenever you create an object, this function is called automatically. This function is called automatically. So whenever you create an object, there is a function in Python called it's a special function called init that is called automatically, and this is called constructor. What does constructor mean? So whatever the details you pass here, right, this will have all the details. So now this pot will have some special characteristic of itself, right? So you can put some special characteristic just for this pot. How do you do that? In the init you can pass arguments. Like in function you pass arguments, right? You can pass your arguments. So you can pass something like, suppose let's say material. So every object in the pottery, they can have different type of material, right? They can have like clay, they can have stoneware or different type of material. They can have different type of color, right? So color is based upon what the end user wants, and they can also have different what's the type of it, like some are traditional, some are ancient, some are functional type, right? These are the function you can pass using in the init, right? You can pass different argument of it, and if you wanted to set this argument for the specific one that's calling this, right, here the pot is calling this pottery, right? So if you wanted to set this for a specific pot, what you can do, you can use this keyword called self. Then you can put dot, then you can name the variable. So here try to name the variable same as what you are naming it here. Okay, so suppose we said it self.material equals to material. Let me write this all, then I'll come back to this, like what this is doing. Self.color equals to color, and self.type equals to type. Okay, now what this will do, if you run this once again, see, it will throw an error. It will say the init is missing 3 required positional argument, but we can't. I said that this is called automatically, right? Then how do you pass this? How do you pass all this variable for this init? So to pass this, when you create an instance of this object using this blueprint, right, inside the parenthesis you can pass all of these details. Like for material, let's pass here clay. Okay, and for the color, let's put here brown. and for the type let's put it traditional. Okay, suppose we are building a pot that is made using clay. The color is brown and it's a traditional pot, that is we are using it for festival or something like this. Okay, so whenever you pass anything inside this parenthesis when calling of the blueprint, right, this will be passed inside the init function. So here since there are three, let's remove this three and put only one for now and run this once again. See, you'll get one more error saying that missing two required arguments, color and type. So whenever you inside the init, whatever the argument that you pass, right, that needs to be passed when calling this blueprint or the pottery class to create an object. So let's pass all of them now and let's clear this out and run this. See, now we don't get any error and we still get this pottery object because we're still printing this pot. So how this init works and what are these these are the characteristics. These are the characteristic of that particular object. I said, right, this self, if you see self function, this method that is specific to that particular object. Here what is that particular object? That particular object is pot. So all this clay, brown and traditional, right, these are being passed to this pot. Pot is one that will have this characteristic, that will have this material, color and type. So we are saying self.material, that means pot.material equals to material. In here material means clay. So if you consider this self, right, so you can say this self means here a pot. So for whom we are calling, right, that is the self here. So it is not for this whole blueprint. Okay, this is not for the whole class that this material will be clay or this is for the particular object that you are creating using this self. But what if there are something that you want to do for the whole? Okay, suppose you wanted to do it for the whole class, so then you can define some variable outside of this init. You can define directly under classes. So we'll say let's create one object called let's create a variable called fire or heated. Okay, you know when they create pottery or pots and vase, they heat it right at the end. Some are heated, some are not heated. So based on it, suppose we'll say heated equals to true. Now this is for the class. Now if you want this heated should be part of this pot also, right, then what you can do inside this init, right, you can write something like this. You can do self dot heated is equals to name of the class pottery dot heated. If you see here there is one difference, right, here we are writing pottery dot heated, though pottery is the name of the class we are using. So if you define anything, the variable that is for the class, right, it is not for the self, then to access that you need to use the name of the class, then heated, name of the class dot the variable, because this is not for specific object, this is for the whole class as a whole. So these are two type of variable that are used. This is for class variable, class variables or characteristic. So this is for all, whatever the object you create in this pottery, right, this all of them will have this heated equals to true. Now if you want to change them, then inside the init you can change them, or we can create a function. Let's create a function called def is heated and we'll put self. You know, first keyword is the self. Self is this argument that is passed automatically saying that this is for the particular object, and here let's pass one argument called heated. Now we can say self dot heated. Now I'll show you how this self become more useful. Okay, now suppose we call this function, okay, is heated. How do you know this function will only change for pot but not change for other object? That is where the self became useful. So the self will take care that this is only being updated for the specific object that is calling this function. We haven't called how this function are called, we haven't seen it, we'll see that. But this self became useful here that now it knows like it did not change all. Suppose you created vase, you created one pot and you created one plate. Now you suddenly said is heated. Should I hit all of them three? No, you should hit only one that you want, right? So this self will take care that it is only heated for the specific object created using that blueprint. Okay, now if you run this, so there should be no change for now. See, there is no change. Now using this pot, right, this pot is an object, you can access them. So what you can say, you can get all the property of it. If you do print pot dot material, right, and run this, See, you'll be getting the clay. So if you wanted to access its property, right? So these properties are here. So what are the properties you can access? You can access the material, you can access the color, you can access the type, you can access the heated. So if you want to access them, you can name of the object dot and name of the variable that you want. So similarly, you can do it for type and color also. So you can do type and you can do color. Now if you run this, see, you will get all of them. So that is how you can access them. And if you want to call the function, I'll show you how this function changes. But before calling a function, let's create one more. Okay, suppose now we want to create something not pot but of plate, and plate is not made with clay but it's made with stoneware. Okay, stoneware. And let's create the, we'll not create in the brown shape but we'll create in the white. Okay, and it's not traditional, it's functional. So there are different type of pottery. Okay, so it's traditional are making for pots, and all the traditionally used for festivals, and most of the festival is mostly festival oriented, and functional are what you use in a day-to-day life made with clay, like plates, glass, bowl, and all of them. Okay, now we created two objects. If you see, we created two, right? This is one pot and this is another called plate. Here pot, here plate is different object. Here plate is different object created using the same blueprint. So here the blueprint may be same, right? But see, here the material will change, the type will change, the color will change. So blueprint is just saying like it's a generalized way, like how a pot can be made, how a vase can be made, but you can change it, the user can change it, right? So the process may almost be similar, like you need to have a circular things, you need to make the clay on a particular shape. Suppose it's just shape. Now if you change the shape, things will start changing, right? If it's rounded like a pot, it's a pot. But if you put in a flat surface with no covering up and down, it behaves like a plate, right? So blueprint gives you idea like what can be created in more generalized way. Now it's up to your imagination how you take things, how you change the shape, change the color, and do it how the user wanted. Now here if you see, there are two things, but now if you print the same thing, what print it using? Not pot, but this time with plate. Okay, let's put it plate here, plate, and run this once again. See, now there are two things. One is pot that is made with clay, type of traditional, and color of brown. But there is plate. This plate is not having clay. If you see, it's stoneware, it's functional and white. But how did Python know that I need to put stoneware and functional for this plate, even though they are part of same blueprint? So that is where the self come. Here the self was called for plate. It was not called for pot, right? So this is how the self became useful. The self is called only for the particular object that was being created, or the particular object that called this function or called this blueprint. So here pot call this blueprint, right? That's why everything that I put here inside this, right? Clay, brown, tradition will be particular to pot. Plate will not have any impact because this pot was created using it. And when this plate was called, we put different things in the pottery, right? So this will not change anything that was created earlier using the same blueprint. So that is how class perform, and that is how the cell became useful. Now let's come how the function works. Okay, suppose now we created this pot of brown color, right? Suppose you wanted to change it to, say we want to make it reddish. Okay, then what we can do in the set color, we can say self dot color is equals to color. Okay, let's pass here one more argument called color. Suppose if you want to change it, okay, if you want to change the color of the pot that you want, these are some of the, if you go to the definition, right? So there will be some actions. Characteristic are the properties of that objects created, like material, color, type, heated. Okay? And here actions are like if you want to perform some action on that particular object, like here you want to change the color of that pot. Suppose you want to change the color of this pot. Okay, so let's comment out for now this, and let's say calling methods. How to call a method? So calling methods. So to call a method, what you can do, you can name the variable. So here the variable of spot, put a dot, and you can do the name of the function. So here the name of the function of set color. Okay, call this set color. And here, since we need one argument, you don't need to pass this self. Okay, this self is passed automatically because when you use this pot dot set color, right, this pot, the reference of this pot is passed as self here automatically. You don't have to, it's taken care by Python by itself. This pot, right, this pot as a reference will be passed inside the self here. You can just pass the color here, so we'll say reddish. Say reddish. Okay, now let's print the same thing once again here. First let's print before this. We'll say before print pot before, and let's break the line here and call this, and we'll do same thing and we'll do pot after. Okay, and let's call this here pot after. Now let's run this. See here, pot before, we have clay, we have traditional, we have brown. That is how we have defined it using here, right? We have brown. But if you see here pot after, see here the color changed to reddish, because we call this function for the pot specifically, but it won't change for plate. Okay, now let's see before plate here, and let's put here also. Okay. Let's put here print plate. Let's now if you run this, see here, first for the plate, right, it was white, but after for the pot it become reddish, but for the plate it's still white. So if you change anything for specific particular thing, right, if you change for particular things, like when you called for pot, right, it won't change everything for the blueprint. It won't change for all the object created using this blueprint. It will change specifically for that object that are passing. So this will change color of the pot and only pot. Okay, so this won't change color of any other objects created using the same blueprint. So that is how classes and the function works in that is how class works in functions, and how calling a function inside the blueprint or the class using a object only changes for a particular object. It won't change for all of the others. Okay, so that is what I wanted to say about how to call a function. Now when you saw when we printed a pot, right, suppose here, let's comment out all of them, and let's comment out this also. So when you saw that when we printed something like this, right, print pot, so it printed like it's an object of pottery. If you see, it's a object of pottery. If you wanted to change this, right, if you wanted to change this and you wanted to print something else, then you can use one more special function like this init. This init, right, there's one more special function called str, def underscore underscore str. It's like the string. Okay, then here you can return something. You can return what instead of this, what should be printed when you using the print function, right? Instead of this, what should be printed? So you can say let's put an f string. We'll say an object of pottery with characteristics, and we'll put self.material, self.color, self.type. So what this will do, whenever you print, right, now it won't print like it's an object of pottery. It will print this. It will say it's an object of pottery with characteristic this. You can put it anything. Okay, whatever you want, you can put it here. Now if you run this once again, see, this time it did not say an object of pottery, but what is it? It's an object of pottery with characteristic clay, reddish and traditional, because these are the characteristic that we provided for this object when using this pottery as a blueprint. So that is it all about it. We'll come back to this. Okay, there is a difference between how you use class variable and how you use variables for the specific object. There will be some differences, and how changing one will change it for all. Okay, and how you can access them, we'll come back to them, but for now you can use them. Use it outside also, inside also. Don't worry like you'll face something wrong, because class is a very large topic. Okay, we'll go forward. It will take some 4 to 5 classes, and I want you to make some error using outside, inside, and think why, if I had everything outside. You use all of this outside. Now this self keyword, use all the property outside. Don't use inside init. Use it outside and see what are the changes you see. Okay, do some error, find some error, like how you can find error. And if you see, we did not use this function isIterated. Do this isIterated, create some more function using the same pottery blueprint, and see if there is any difficulties you find in what we learned today. So let me recap, okay, what we did for today. This is small how to get introduction. There's many things to learn. We'll come back here. We'll be coming back here again and again and again, so that we understand all in a very detailed way. But for the first class, I think just getting idea of what classes are, how function works, and what characteristics are, that is very useful. So first is, what is class? So class is like a blueprint, a plan, a recipe that defines how to create object. So class takes a reference of a real world, okay? How real world performs, it tries to do in the same way. It will create one blueprint of how things needs to be done or how things needs to be created using that blueprint, and it will create the blueprint. Inside the blueprint, it will pass some what are the characters they need to have. Everything it will have different characters, so it will just generalize it. So it will not put you a color directly, it will say the color as a variable. Now whatever the variable, what are the value you put in color, that will be color for that object. So that is how this blueprint works. And how do you define a class or a blueprint? You write the keyword called class and put the name of the class. The name of the class is always a title case, that is the first letter should be in caps, and you don't put underscore when naming a class. You would just change, make it a uppercase and write the next word starting here itself. So if it's a blueprint, so you can directly write flutter blue here directly like this, okay? Don't put in underscore or anything. That is how it's asked that name of the class to be. Then inside the class, there are two type of variables that you can do. One is class variable, that is for the class as a whole. But if you want that variables should be only for the particular object, there is one special function, okay? This is a special function, okay? Special function that is called automatically, and in Python we call it constructor, okay? Called constructor, or by the name if you go, it's called initializer. Okay, it's called constructor for other languages, like in every language it's called constructor, but since Python has named it init, so it's called initializer in Python, okay? And what this does, whenever you create an object of this blueprint, right? So how do you create an object? You create an object, you name a variable, put an assignment symbol, that is equal sign, and name of the class. Inside this, so there is one error case, put this, okay? Write this here. If there is no init, then you can create something like this, pot equals to pottery, and you don't need to pass anything inside the, if there is no init or no argument inside init other than self, then what you can do, then you can use this, okay? You can name of the variable, put an assignment, and name of the class, and put the parenthesis, okay? Since here we have some more properties like material, color, and type, that's why when we created this pot object here, right, we put in the all the variables here. And how this variable works, this, since this is called automatically, and if you wanted it should be part for that particular object, right, then you use self dot material. Here you can name it anything, but it's recommended that since you know what are the variables that are passed here, name it same, so that it becomes helpful for you to read, and anyone using it finds it very useful to read it also and to access them. Now since there are two type of variable, the class variable can be accessed using the class name dot heated. This is how class variable are accessed, okay? So you use the name of the class dot and the name variable here. So this is how you put characteristic to a object created using this blueprint. Now inside class you can create function, and these are called methods when defined inside classes, or this is just a simple function, but there is one difference. There is one extra argument that is always being passed, that is called self. You can name this anything, but it's recommended to keep it self. And what this self does, this takes reference from the object calling it, okay? Whatever the object called it, it takes a reference for this and changes the thing only for that object, not for any others, okay? So this is self. So you can define any type of function. And when you create an object, and if you wanted to print something little bit more so the user can understand like what this is, you can use the str function. If you don't define this, right, it will just say what is the object created, okay? So this is this is what you get when you print the object created. So when you create the object and when you try to print this spot, right, then you'll be getting this string. So if you want to make it more user friendly, then you can use this function to make it user friendly. So use this function to make user friendly, so the user understands that when you print, like what are this classes, what it does, and how the character changes. For this we are saying the object of property with characteristic, all of this. Okay, and we know how to create an object. Use the name of the object equals, put the name of the class, and use all the arguments that are required. Try to what are the arguments? These arguments are whatever is passed in the init function. And how do you access? So let's put here accessing the characteristic. Its characteristics. See, the characteristic is like name of the object plus dot plus characteristic name. So how do you do it? Here you can do print pot dot material. Okay, here since material is the name of the characteristic, here if you see self dot material, so you can use here pot is the name of the object. Okay, here use dot then material. This is how you access. And similarly, if you want to call a function or a method, then you can use pot dot name of the function, and if there is any variable, pass here. You don't have to pass self. Okay, here self is passed automatically. It's a reference of pot here that is passed as self by default. So you don't have to care of the self. Okay, here self will have a reference of this pot object that is being passed. Only you pass all the variable, you don't have to care of self is being passed. And then we saw if you change it, it will only change for the particular object, it will not change for any other object created using that blueprint. And now if you print this pot, you should be getting something like this. So this is a brief introduction to how classes are. I know for it may be a little bit hard if you are just a beginner, but do this, make some error. I say what are the errors that you can make. Put all this material color type directly here and see how it's not an error, it's a learning process. Like what are the difference of it, we'll come back to it. Okay, we'll come back to class variable and this object variable. These are called object variable. Okay, these are objects variables. These are object variable, and the previous one was class variable. Class variables are for the class as a whole, object variable for the particular object created for that blueprint. So yeah, that was it for today. Let's push this to GitHub. If you're facing any difficulties, please comment out, or we've created a Telegram group for discussion. You can come there and we can discuss if you are facing any difficulties. Okay, let's push it to GitHub. Let's see what are the changes. Git status. So only one change. Git add all. Git commit introduction to class. Okay, it says okay, it's not 0m, it's m. Let's push it. Git push origin main. This should get pushed. Click on the link, we should be getting to GitHub, and let's see if it got pushed. If you come back lecture 16, yes, classes got pushed, and you have all the changes here. So yeah, if you're facing any difficulties, please comment out. Okay, class is a little bit harder, I know that, and how so many things needs to be know. You need to know about how init works, how string work, what methods are, what characteristics are. But I've tried to put some comment here so that you understand how things are working. But still, if you're facing any difficulty, please comment out. I'll try to solve it. And still, if you're facing you can't solve in the, then you can come to our community in our Let's Code Together discussion group in Telegram, and we can have a chat there. So yeah, that was it for today. Thank you for watching. See you in the next.